Welcome to the Design for Living Big Book Study. Gord and I, Bill and I will be sharing our own experience of how the Big Book has helped. I'm glad that you're paying attention. Has helped us in the removal of our DOC, or actually our substance of no choice. But more importantly, how the directions contained within the Big Book have helped change all aspects of our lives. We will share our pain, our successes as it relates to our own journey and the hundreds of men and women that we have helped. We've had the pleasure of helping through sponsorship or otherwise. Bill, myself, the THEUDRCAST, we're not affiliated with any 12-step program. We neither endorse nor discredit any method of recovery. We are supportive of all paths to recovery. We're just passionate about what worked for us. The opinions shared in this study are solely that of the person sharing them. Okay, let's go.
Okay, so we're going to start in the 12 and 12 on page 42. Just to touch base on a couple things that Gord had touched base on as you guys read through the step 6. In the 6, it talked about the instincts. Now, maybe I'll just kind of pull that up. You guys can go there if you want, but you don't have to. It's going to be quick. So on page 65, second paragraph, it talks about, since most of us are born with an abundance of natural desires, isn't it strange that we often let these far exceed their intended purpose? When they drive us blindly. Pay attention to that one. When they drive us blindly, these desires or these instincts, or we willfully demand that they supply us with more satisfactions or pleasures than are possible, or do us. That is the point which we depart from the degree of perfection that God wishes for us here on earth. That is the measure of our character defects, or if you wish, our sins. Or if you could say it like this, let's say God made you perfect, and when you were a baby, God as we understood him, that's what we're trying to get back to, right? God as we understood him. What does that even mean? You've heard it in the literature your whole life in this program, but what does it mean? To me, what it means is we're trying to get back to when we were whole. And as we move through life, we get fractured, we get splintered. And then these things become our defects, and the splinters happen because we didn't get certain emotional security or different types of love or whatever it was that we needed. We didn't get it, so then our instincts are kind of like always trying to grab and fill the voids of these fractures. And so we're trying to get back to God as we understood him, meaning back to a whole being of who we once were when we knew God, when we were kids or children. So that is the measure of our defects, or if you wish, our sins. But if we ask God, he will certainly forgive our derelictions. But in no case does he render us white as snow and keep us that way without our cooperation. So what it's saying is God will forgive you, and God does forgive you, but do your part, right? Do your part so that you're not like taking advantage of the forgiveness kind of in a way. This is something that we are supposed to be willing to work towards ourselves. And when we started step 6, it talked about this is the step that separates the men from the boys, right? That the boys are going to strive for a self-determined objective, and the men are going to strive for a perfect objective, which is God. And if God's love, then we're striving for something better, and it's in love. It's like God, okay? So we are supposed to work towards this ourselves. He'll only ask that we try the best we know to make progress in the building of character. So we're trying to do our best at all times. Any person capable of enough willingness and honesty to try repeatedly step 6 on all his faults without reservation has indeed come a long way spiritually. That's like high level fucking character building. That means when you have an opportunity to lash out and it would feel good, and maybe you think they deserve it, you fucking don't. And you don't justify it if you do. You look at it as your spiritual progress, not perfection. Fuck. Okay, I did lash out. I did say something mean. I did judge them in a harsh way. I did gossip. And sometimes you're going to catch it after the fact. And why it's saying like here, you know, it's the best possible attitude to keep trying. Because you're not going to be perfect. And don't try to be perfect. But try to catch it before and do it at a high level. And if you do mess up, then that's fine. Just take the data from it and redouble your efforts and keep trying is really what it's saying. And as you and I'll read this last piece before we flip into the 4. So step 6, we were entirely ready to have God remove these defects of character, is AA's way of stating the best possible attitude one can take in order to make a beginning on this lifetime job. So it's the best attitude that you can have in the beginning of a what? Of a lifetime job. You try to do your best, and then a lot of us will beat ourselves up because of what we do or say. That's not the goal here. You know, God's going to forgive your derelictions, but he's not going to render you white as snow without your cooperation, which means try again and keep trying, and don't beat yourself up. And when people are trying to guilt you, because especially in this program, you'll be held to a high fucking level, and people will be like, dude, what kind of program are you working, or whatever. You got to just because there's a lot of judgment in the program too, right? So we got there's a lot of judgment in this program.
Let me share an experience. As an example, I experienced this last year when I actually gave work to a man that was really struggling. And this man has been sober for a long period of time. So much longer than me. And he thought that, you know, he had it going on, but he'd been through some cancer throes and, you know, and some issues and COVID, you know, and this and that. And he was struggling. So I wanted to extend, you know, a little bit of help. So I gave this painter a job, and he was kind of a dick, you know, in trying to collect his money. Like I told him like this, we get paid, the next pay run is next month, and you got to get your invoice in before the 24th, and then, you know, we'll look at payment for the following on, you know, somewhere around the 20th of the following month, right? And it ended up being all these text messages, and it aggravated me to a point where I finally said, look, man, fuck off. I told you what it was, right? Now, that was wrong behavior on my part. But you know what the next thing that came out of his mouth was? Yeah, there's your program. That's the Gord, real spiritual guy, right? Well, I didn't like it too much in the moment, but recognized my fault, apologized for my behavior. He never did. And guess what? Literally a week and a half ago, I got a text message and a voicemail from that man making amends. That was a year and a bit later, right? So pretty cool. What that shows me is, A, I'm glad I didn't lash out even further. B, he's also trying. He's also trying. We all have to keep trying. But Bill's right. It's easy to be attacked when you do try to live a spiritual life and fail once in a while. It's almost like I heard it from the Christians. They have this saying out of the Bible that it says, judge not your fellow man, judge your fellow Christians, for they're the ones that take my word to the people, and if they're behaving poorly, it doesn't sit right. They're failing people by acting out. I'm just using that as an example, right? It's the same thing. I'm a representative of quality recovery, I'd like to think, and it doesn't mean that I'm perfect, but it means that I need to strive for that, and I'm going to open myself up to ridicule at times when I make mistakes.
Yeah, and Gord's pillars will come to him and say, I think you're out of line here, or whatever. I have them also, and I got to be open to that, right? So, yeah, don't beat yourself up. It's a defect that's kind of hidden underneath it all, and it'll not serve any real good purpose. But that doesn't mean not beat yourself up at all either. Right? There's a balance in all this.
The weasel clause, right? We talked about that last week, right? The keywords entirely ready underline the fact that we want to aim at the very best we know or can learn, right? Yes, it's progress, not perfection, but But the men from the boys, if I want to be a man, if I want to be a grown-up, as I talked about last week, I have to strive for perfection, even though I'm going to fail. Right.
Okay. Okay, now that we just talked about the instincts, now we're going to go into the instincts. So you have your defects of character that, let's say you got a tree. The tree has branches, and the branches will be the defect of character. Underneath the tree is all the roots. And like you guys know that typically a root system of a tree is almost usually twice as big as the tree above ground. The health of that tree is always dependent on what's below the ground. What nutrients is it getting? What feed is it getting? What water streams are under there? You know, whatever. Okay, so the whole health of the tree is basically based on things you can't see. And then you see the tree. So for us, as we kind of look at branches of anger, branches of contempt, branches of lust and, you know, emotional security, and we have all these different branches, which are the fractures, are our defects. And a lot of times we can see some of these defects, and they're easy to see. And so as you start breaking these defects, right, at least noticing them, okay, I break a little end of that defect off, and it's the stick on the end of the branch. But the more you break off that branch, you get to the thicker part of the branch, and eventually you get to the trunk. So you have all these branches off, and then you're breaking them, and you're working on your defects, but it gets harder the closer you get to the center of the tree. Once you get to the trunk of the tree, now it's fucking getting real hard. But that's us keep working over the years. We work our program. But really where do these defects come from is they come from where you can't see them. That's the instincts. So we have selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear. You guys always hear those defects. From those fucking 4 defects are many other little defects, right? So it's not just selfish, dishonesty, resentment, and fear. It's little pieces off of those even, and little pieces off of those even. Those are the branches. But where they come from is from underneath the tree where the root system is, where it's twice as big as what you see. And the thing about the roots, remember when you were a kid and you got that little fucking spruce tree and it had like 4 little roots on it, and you were going to plant that in your yard? The school gave you a little tree and you're going to go plant that at home, right? And you could see it had like 4 little sticks on the bottom that were the roots. So you go and you dig a little hole and you get some potting soil and you plant that, and then fucking 20 years later, there's your tree. And now that little tree that had 4 roots, let's say, you know, sex relation, emotional, material security, and companionship, those are the instincts. Now those things just fucking grew everywhere. And those roots actually cross over each other and they grow into each other. And if you ever dug up a tree, you can see where a root crossed another root and actually embedded themselves in each other. So that's what's going on with our instincts underneath, okay? So this is kind of the beginning of what we're going to learn about the instincts. So creation, and they're God-given, right? Creation gave us instincts for a purpose. For without them, they wouldn't be complete human beings. If men and women didn't exert themselves to be secure in their persons, made no effort to harvest food or construct shelter, there would be no survival. If they didn't reproduce, the earth wouldn't be populated. If there were no social instinct, if men and women cared nothing for society of one another, there would be no society. So these desires or instincts, for sex relation, there's 1, material security 2, emotional security 3, and companionship 4, are perfectly necessary, right, and surely God-given. God gave everybody the same instincts. The problem with most alcoholics is those instincts have been fractured along the journey of life. Yet these instincts, so necessary for our existence, often far exceed their proper functions. So you got your instincts in a circle like this that God gave them to you, and we take them outside of the circle. The further outside the circle we go with an instinct, the more pain we cause others and ourselves. And the more different ones we take out of that circle is more pain that we cause ourselves. Later in this reading, it'll say instincts on rampage. So our instincts go on rampage and they balk at investigation. Does anyone know what balk means? They don't want to be looked at. right? They balk at investigation. So that's why when you lived outside in the world before you came here, you have pride. And when somebody would say something to you, you're like, fuck you. So Gord, when Buddy said that to him, and he said, fuck off, right? That was his instinct, balking at investigation. He didn't want to acknowledge that part about himself until he had to. He's like, fuck, he's kind of right. And he has to make the amend, right? And so our instincts don't want to be looked at, and they balk, and they actually push away from being looked at because they're actually trying to protect us. But they don't protect us, they slowly kill us. So yet these instincts so necessary for our existence often far exceed their proper functions. Think about these words: powerfully, blindly, many times subtly. They will drive us, dominate us, insist upon ruling our lives. That's powerful fucking shit, man. So your instinct for social security, to be one of the boys. Think about your life, or you girls, to be one of the girls or one of the boys in society. And these things will drive us, dominate us, insist upon ruling our lives, and they will also work powerfully, blindly, and subtly. So I've come up with a fake example of this, and it's kind of like, there's a few guys in an AA meeting and nobody's there, and they're the first ones there, right? And they're all fresh out in treatment, and they're 6 months sober, and you got the jock, and he's the one that's lifting weights and, fucking on roids or whatever, and he's got the watch and the fucking baby Gap shirt that he's wearing that doesn't fit him right, and and then you got another guy with his own personality traits and another guy with their personality traits, and they're all new and they're trying to get well, but they're not really well yet. And so this hottie walks into the room, and she's the first woman to come into the room. And then all these guys who had some camaraderie going, fuck, it's just, now they stop talking about what they were talking about. Ever been there? Right? Men and women. And then the guy with the baby Gap shirt gets up, and he's like flexing as he walks to the coffee machine and pulls, makes that watch be seen, that fucking, that fake Japanese Rolex, and fucking let's see that, right? And fucking, maybe he looks at her and says hi, and then the next thing he's talking, and then the next thing he's wheeling her. And his buddies are over there going, bro, we're over here. Your friends are over here, man. And he's ditched his buddies now because he's now kind of consumed with the instinct for a sex relation. Maybe there's emotional security tied in there, companionship. Maybe he's in his head, he's always I'm going to marry this girl, right? You never know. That's how quick things roll, man. And so powerfully, blindly, subtly, this defect, this instinct is driving him, dominating him, and insisting upon ruling his life. Okay, I sponsored the guy, and I remember step 5. Fuck, this was his pattern. This is what gets him drunk, over and over. Why is that? Well, because he didn't get what he needed as a kid. He didn't have a good father figure. His mom was maybe not present, blah, 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 blah. It all kind of stems down to the roots that are underneath the soil that you can't see. But it's driving his whole life, right? And so that's just a snippet. It can be money, it can be jobs, it can be all sorts of different types of behaviors. Then they're all driven by the instincts. So again, I'm just going to read this. Powerfully, blindly. You don't see it, man. That's why you need pillars, because you can't see self from self. And you will always think you have the best idea for your own life, but that's where you're blind. That's where we need to have pillars to kind of call us on the blind spots, because we can't see them. And these things are powerfully. And when you think about the step 4 and the 12 and 12, it says, driven by 100 forms of fear and self-delusion. Driven. And fear. Fear is the unseen propulsion of a force that you can't see. You can't see it, man. And it drives you. And it's powerful. Okay? And it creates delusion. So powerfully, blindly, subtly. These things drive us. They dominate us. And they insist upon ruling our lives. So our desires for sex, material, and emotional security and for an important place in society often tyrannize us. And you can look at where money has tyrannized you, or lust has tyrannized you, or your anger has tyrannized you. You know, maybe you're always angry and then you end up with no friends. Or maybe that you have sex with all the women around you and you end up with no friends or no respect, right? Or money becomes the sole and object of your life. And so you'll trample on people to get the money. Or you constantly think that money's the key to happiness, and the delusion is so strong that you always go and try to make the money. And you're so afraid to not be who you are that you'll sell out your soul to not be who you are. And the money has tied into the social construct of your community of friends and many other things. Like, it's complex, right? And that's where those roots underneath, where they grow into each other and they get embedded in each other. But the thing about these roots that grow into each other underneath where the darkness is as you heal one thing. So we always think that healing is linear. We're like, oh, I got to heal this part of myself. I'm going to heal that. I'm going to heal. Healing doesn't fucking work like that. Healing's not linear like our ego wants to compartmentalize everything. How healing works is it's like you start working on one thing, you're working on many things because they're embedded in each other. Now, if you become super willing and honest to try repeatedly step 6 on all your faults without reservation, now you're working on all the things all the time as much as possible. So you exacerbate your healing journey like tenfold. But you got to be aware of your thoughts and your actions. Be willing to do this repeatedly on all your faults without reservation. Now, if you do it like half-assed sometimes when it's convenient to you, that fucking journey is a long journey. And you will suffer a long fucking time. And you won't get what I'm saying that you can have. I've seen it, man. So I'll finish this paragraph and then I'll turn it over to Gord. Thus, when out of joint, man's natural desires cause him great trouble, practically all the trouble there is. So whatever your trouble is in your life, and if it turns into great trouble, doesn't matter what trouble it is, it's always related to the instincts. Always, man. Nearly every serious emotional problem can be seen as a case of misdirected instinct. What's the emotional problem that you have? You got to ask yourself. Well, it's always tied to misdirected instinct. Always. And I've sponsored enough people to know that why I'm spending so much time here is because that's fucking true, man. It's always your instinct. But you got to maybe start at the branch. Okay, here's the defect. And you got to kind of follow the branch to the, where it becomes harder to break, and then into the trunk, and you kind of got to follow it down. But you can't just identify, oh, that's it. Oh, that's the reason, because I was abandoned when I was a kid. Like, it's not that simple, man. It takes time, and it takes continually looking, and then you'll see that maybe it's a combination of a bunch of different things together. And it's not going to happen fucking overnight. And it won't happen at all if you don't try. You'll just drink and drink over and over and over and over again. So, when that happens, our great natural assets, the instincts, have turned into physical and mental liabilities. So as you don't work on the instincts, it turns into a mental liability. So a lot of like mental health issues in our society today, let's say anxiety, depression, and then there's many other ones, they actually stem from the instincts. And it's then the behaviors and the fears that we act out in. And I don't have the ability to maybe say something and stand up for myself, right? That's the defect. It's a fear-based defect where I can't stand up to you and speak the truth to you. So then I suppress it. And then what happens is I get fucking anxiety. And the longer I don't deal with it, the higher my anxiety goes, to the point where I go to the doctor and I need drugs to like medicate this. But then my brain says, oh, I have an anxiety problem, drugs is gonna fix it. So we never get to the core of the issue of what it actually is. Same with depression. So these things will turn into physical and mental liabilities. They will actually make you sick inside your body and create other illnesses. And when you look across the board at a lot of physical illnesses, like I'm going to just mention a couple, like fibromyalgia, it's cause unknown. And if you look at a lot of our illnesses that are physical in our world today, they actually have cause unknown. They don't know where they come from, but they can treat the symptom with a drug. But they never really do anything to the root of the problem, so they're constantly on drugs, on all these different drugs. And why? My opinion is because the spiritual malady and these instincts and defects cause me to be physically fucking sick. And then I get tumors from too much anxiety, and I get all these like ulcers and different things like my blood and whatever issues I could have. But they come from unfit spiritual conditioning. So that's it.
Yeah, just that. That's all.
That's all.
Fuck all. That's nothing. Yeah. Does everyone understand what Bill means when he says linear? It's all linear. It's not all linear, is more what he said. Does everyone get that? Yeah? It's not just a simple problem to solve. It's the shortest way between 2 points is a straight line, right? Linear. But we're told in this program that the easiest, softest way is not the best way for us. These things branch out, and this is all I've really got to say about this. These desires, these instincts, like at one point it's perfectly natural to be attracted to women. It's perfectly natural to have friends and want friends. And it becomes unnatural. Say, for example, my father was very abusive and he was never there. That's where it started for me, okay? When he was there, he was very abusive. So guess what? My need for companionship started to skew. It started to distort. And I had no idea at that point because I was that innocent, really. I was that innocent that I was blind to the distortion that was taking place. And all of a sudden, those learned behaviors, or if you will, I like to call them distorted instincts, start to take over. Why? Because I needed something, and I didn't even know it at the time, but I needed something to protect me from the pain I was feeling. That is why my entire life I used drugs and alcohol. That is why my entire life I chose anger and violence. That is why my entire life I chose the wrong women. Until, of course, I met my wife. If you ever watch this, I love you, honey. I did find a good one. We've been married for 26 years now. But, before that, thank you. That's just a gift. I don't know where it came from. There's a gift. But my entire life was filled with distorted instincts. And I couldn't see it. And so Bill says that the corrections of that, I can't just focus on my anger. Because my anger comes from all sorts of learned behaviors. My anger manifests in many different scenarios in my life. Just like my need for companionship. Hell, and then Bill starts talking about roots crossing. Well, my need for companionship is so distorted that when I'm not getting that fulfilled, my anger starts to come in and take over. You see what I'm saying? That's what Bill's putting across is these lines, they get so crossed and so jungled. Have you ever had a root ball? In a plant that you're trying to grow and it's just not growing anymore, and you pull it up out and its roots are all the ends of the roots are dying because it's too much. You have to put it in a bigger plant or a soft cover plant that it can grow through, right? Our root balls are so dense that we need help. We need help figuring out the paths, figuring out what roots cross what roots and what the correct behaviors are. And not only that, we need time. That's why they say this is a lifetime job. Nothing can be solved today. A year ago, I'm at 8 years sober. And I worked very hard at being a better human being, and I still told that guy to fuck off. You know what I mean? This is going to be an ongoing thing because he finally angered me. You know? It's going to be a work in progress. I'm dedicated today. That's the gift I've been given. I'm dedicated to the change, dedicated to the behavioral growth. No one ever said it's easy. And certainly, I've never, ever claimed to be perfect at it. That's what this whole session is going to be about. Learning about how these things drive us from different angles, where we can start to become aware of how they're crossing and what we actually need to look at within ourselves with another 12-step member and with God. It's very, very important. We need to grow. It tells us in the big book, you know, that our lives are dependent on daily spiritual growth. Daily spiritual growth. And without that, we will die. So we're learning about spiritual growth through our behavior. That's all I've got, really.
Okay. And like along this journey, like in your first year, like, you know, recovery's pretty easy, man. Like, well, let's just be honest here. Recovery's pretty fucking easy. Yeah, it's hard. It's probably one of the harder things that you've had to do. But it gets real hard at like year 2 and 3. Yeah. But it doesn't get that hard if you're working a good program. It doesn't get that hard. But if you ain't working a good program, it gets really fucking hard. So that's why it's so important to kind of like work a good, solid program so that when year 3 and year 4 hits and the shit's really coming up, that those roots that are coming up that are all crossed over, they're coming up so that you can reveal to heal them. And the longer you don't drink or use drugs, the more that this stuff is coming up. So you've seen people that have no program, or maybe some of our elders or older people that just were able to quit drinking, but then they're not well because they got a lot of anger, they got a lot of resentment, and that's just because they don't have a solution, right? And their shit is dealing with them. So we learn how to deal with our shit. And like I've always told you guys from the beginning, this is a millimeter by millimeter by millimeter journey. And it's really hard to see the millimeters, but if you're working like a good step 6, step 10, any person capable of enough willingness, are you fucking willing? And honesty, rigorous honesty. Are you honest with yourself? And you got to remember that you're not capable of just honesty on your own. And like when you understand that part, that you're not capable of honesty on your own by yourself to see the cunningness of self, then you will be able to expose it with the help of God-centered 12-step pillars. But if you just think you're good on your own and you just run your life on your own, you will miss the gold. You will miss the gold. Like have your pillars and use them even though you think you run a good program, because self is really cunning. And these instincts that drive us powerfully, blindly, and subtly, they will drive you if you're not like working with other people, like especially sponsoring, but at least minimum having a sponsor or God-centered 12-step people where you can talk about things so that you can expose the cunningness of self. And then through the millimeter by millimeter journey, you'll heal. And it takes a while, but you'll get good at it.
We talked about this earlier tonight when I first got here, right? It seems like a lot of work, but you get into this for a little while, it is far less work than I worked at trying to get my fix every day. I'll tell you that right now. What a draining endeavor trying to figure out how I was going to change the way I felt every single day. Sun up to sundown. My God, how am I going to get that bottle? How am I going to get that whatever? That's draining. It's very tiring.
Okay, let's go.
We're at instincts, right? And we're talking about figuring out their pathways and figuring out with 12-step people. How do we do that? Well, here we go. Step 4. Step 4 is our vigorous and painstaking effort to discover what these liabilities in each of us have been and are. So it's telling me right there, the way to figure this out is to get going on a step 4. We want to find exactly how, when, and where our natural desires have warped us. We wish to look squarely at the unhappiness this has caused others and ourselves. By discovering what our emotional deformities are, we can move toward their correction. Step 6, we can move at changing the behavior. Once we learn what's going on. I had no clue until I did a step 4 that I had big problems. And I'll be honest, the first step 4 I did, it taught me some of it. And I've had to do a lot of work and more step 4s after to figure out more, and I'll probably do more in the future. Or I'll do a lot more step 10s in the future. Without a willing and persistent effort to do this, there can be little sobriety or contentment for us. Without a searching and fearless moral inventory, most of us have found that the faith which really works in daily living is still out of reach. So if I don't figure out what the roots are and how they start crossing each other and how tangled they are and root bound they are below the surface, which is really painful to figure out, if I don't do that, I'm not going to be able to find contentment. I'm not going to be able to find true recovery. That's a very big warning. Before tackling the inventory problem in detail, let's have a closer look at what the basic problem is. Simple examples like the following take on a world of meaning when we think about them. Suppose a person places sex desire ahead of everything else. In such a case, this imperious urge can destroy his chances for material and emotional security as well as his standing in the community. So it's telling me right there, if I look at my sex conduct in step 4, I can start to see how that is ruining other avenues or other parts of my life. How it's starting to make me dishonest around people. How it's making me be angry around people. How it's affecting me in my day-to-day living around other people, not just the people that I have a sex desire for. That's exactly what Bill's talking about. Imperious urge. What does that mean?
I think like compelling.
A compelling urge?
Somebody Google it.
This imperious, oh, I think in Star Wars, the Imperial forces. I think that's wrong. A powerfully expanding urge. Thank you. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So, yeah, let's hear the exact.
Imperious urge describes a strong, commanding, and often arrogant desire or impulse, suggesting a feeling of entitlement and need to be obeyed.
So strong, commanding, often egotistical urge to dominate. Yeah? Close enough? Okay, that was the actual definition. So that fits here pretty well, eh? And it can destroy our material and emotional security as well as our standing in the community. Another may develop such an obsession for financial security. How many times has someone gone to speak at Detox? I know I have. Yeah, you guys, there's guys here that do it, right? Speak at Detox or treatment centers even. And in your story, like I'll tell what I do for a living, that I run a restoration construction company. And I got some guy that's 3 days in detox saying, hey, can I give you my number, man? I want a job. And I have to say to them, no, you can't. Focus on what you're doing right now. But his desire is, he knows, like, I need to get a job. I need to make money. If I want to stay sober, he thinks that getting money is the first step, right? But it is not. And we're going to learn more about that later, that in fact, that is last. That is one of the last. Our spiritual growth has to come first. I hate saying no to those guys too, but I have to, right? Like, I'm not going to hire a guy right out of Alpha House. Like, oh, sure, come and work for us. Because I wouldn't have hired me when I was in detox. Like, are you kidding me right now? So, where are we here? How frequently we see a frightened human being determined to depend completely upon a stronger person for guidance and protection. This weak one, failing to meet life's responsibilities with his own resources, never grows up. Disillusionment and helplessness are his lot. In time, all his protectors either flee or die, and he is once more left alone and afraid. What is that talking about? It's definitely fear. It's also companionship. It's a need for emotional security. But what that's talking about is trying to fulfill that need through human devices. I have a sponsee right now. It's got several years clean and sober. And he has to meet with me weekly and has to get my opinion on everything he does. I love this man dearly. But man, at this point in your recovery, you got to rely on God. I can't be there all the time. I'm not anybody's higher power. I'm an addict just like all of you. I've been in jail just like you guys. I'm just like you. I can't save you. This disillusionment and helplessness are his lot. That means that's his lot in life if he continues to think this way, if he continues to rely and doesn't realize that that need for human resource is actually a very deep-rooted instinct that's gone really, really wrong. That is a huge defect of character. How do we find out? Well, we continue on. I think I'll stop there. I'll let you talk about it.
Okay, thanks, Gord. Okay, I just want to touch on a couple little things. So right where Gord started, all through the study we've talked about like going to the beginning, and like we talked about when we were doing step 4, step 5 about really like examining our whole life, not just like a little piece of it, but going back to the start when I was a kid and like examining my whole life all the way up. And especially in the sex conduct, in the relationship conduct, because that relationship conduct honestly will really reveal a lot of the defects that Gord's talking about and that we're talking about tonight. And we'll be able to see why they're so powerful, blind, and subtle. We'll be able to see why they drive us and dominate us, insist upon ruling our life, and why they tyrannize us. And like, what are some examples of tyrannizing us? Like, relationships over and over and over, and they always end up the same way, and you're still fucking single, right? And you're always, the pattern reveals that you're always going for the same type of person, or you're trying to save somebody, or whatever the pattern is. Or, maybe, you think sex is the way to keep that guy, and so that's what you do your whole life, and every time you do it, it doesn't work out, right? Or whatever it might be, right? Or the guy always thinking that he needs to make the money and have the job and play the big shot to get the women and keep the girl, but he still ends up broke all the time because he hasn't built character, because character doesn't lie within the money and the job, right? It lies within the being, right? And so, step 4 is a vigorous and painstaking effort to discover what the liabilities in each of us have been and are. We're to look in ourselves vigorously and painstakingly to find out what they have been and are. Those two statements are important. What have they been and what are they today? We want to find exactly how, when, where. How did it happen? Where in my life did it happen? When did it happen? Our natural desires have warped us. So it's a God-given natural instinct and desire, but we perverted it and misused it possibly. So we made it crooked. It could have been from a belief, could have been from a judgment, could have been from, how guys treated women when you were in high school, or how your uncle or your father treated women, or your mother. Like, it could have been crooked somehow, some way. But unless you look at how, when, and where, and what it has been and what it is today, you can't really see what you're looking for. So you can't see the defect, right? And maybe you see the defect, but you don't know how far down the tree to follow this defect. But if you are doing these things, you'll be like, oh, here's the defect. Okay, I'm in all these relationships that always fail, or I'm constantly getting fired from jobs, or whatever it is. And then as you start exposing it, you can get partway down the trunk of the tree and start revealing what it is. And then it says, we wish to look squarely at the unhappiness this has caused others and ourselves. Who wants to look directly at unhappiness? Nobody. I've been taught to run from that shit as from the plague my whole life. Society has told me don't feel pain. Oh, you want pain? Come and drink this beer. You know, come and get this massage. Go to fucking Mexico and take a trip. Like, avoid pain at all costs is what you've been taught. Who wants to look squarely at the pain and unhappiness that I've fucking caused everybody? Nobody wants to. Well, do you want to change? That's kind of what we're talking about, right? And eventually you'll see that that's where the gold is. That's where the gold lies. That's where the diamond is. So we have to look squarely at the unhappiness and pain this has caused. So if, like, anger was a big one for me, and when I find, and anger, everyone thinks anger is the defect. Anger is not the fucking defect. Anger is a symptom of your sadness, guaranteed. Anger isn't anything other than something sad in you that you need to look at, and it almost always ties to your own self-worth or your inability to accept yourself, and so you get angry. And it's more complex than that, but anger is just a headline. It's like lust. Lust and anger, they're both headlines. Neither of them are really defects. They might be a symptom of a defect, but they're so broad and so general that you don't get really any much value out of those. You got to kind of go underneath the layers of what anger is or what lust is. And then you'll start seeing, and the number one out of all four of those, emotional security. Number one, man. It far exceeds most of the others, and it actually brings those other instincts into the emotional security, because you want to be secure in who you are and in society. So your material security kind of needs to be, I need a good job and I need a house to attract my mate, to have companionship, to have sex relation, to be secure in life, right? So the emotional security kind of draws in the other instincts. So by discovering what our emotional deformities are, so looking for them, discovering what they are to whatever level, maybe it's just a beginning level and then you get deeper as you keep working it, we can move towards their correction. Without a willing and persistent effort to do this, if you're not willing and if you're not persistent, and that's millimeter by millimeter by millimeter, and because part of this work is painful, you might have to keep like going into the pain. And it sucks, right? It sucks. And people don't do that. And it's normal not to do that. And if you want to do what's fucking normal, then be prepared to drink and use again. Or at minimum, be not very happy, because self's going to run the show. And whatever you're resisting to look at will always persist in your life. Whatever you resist will always persist. So whatever you try to ignore, you ain't ignoring it, because the fucking lesson's coming and the beating's going to continue.
Yeah. Truth.
So without a searching and fearless moral inventory, most of us found that the faith that really works, man, in daily living, like every day, is still out of reach. And step 6, the first paragraph of step 6 talked about that as well. Humility. And now just this bottom paragraph before we go on break, Gord touched on it. He brought some really good points out of this. I'm just going to ride off his coattails a bit. How frequently we see a frightened human being determined to depend completely on a stronger person. And what comes to my mind in this instance, and I can come up with a few, but I'll use this one, is women. Women that are weak, that try to go to men to protect them. And so they'll constantly go to a man to get the protection and the support and whatever it is that they need. Maybe it's like financial support. Maybe it's like, you know, they need this man to like live, basically. So this weak one, for guidance and protection. This weak one, failing to meet life's responsibilities with his own resources, her own resources, never grows up, man. disillusionment, and helplessness are her lot. And what I love about this line, so in the middle there it says resources. What do you think the resource is that I'm fucking talking about? You're close. Inner God. Boom. If you can think honestly, if you can search diligently within yourself, then if you wish, you can join us on the broad highway, going within yourself. If we can only clear the ground a bit, if our testimony helps sweep away prejudice, then if you wish, you can join us on the broad highway. With this attitude, you can't fail. God's in here, man. This is the resource that I need to live. And if I can tap into this resource, I can be authentic and I don't become weak and I don't need to depend on anything outside of me and God to live my fucking life. But that's the resource, is this one right here. So this week one, failing to meet life's responsibilities on their own resources, never grows up. If I can learn how to tap into this, and I can pull my strength from Creator, and I can like start healing and do what this is saying, I actually grow up because I'm able to go through any situation, and I can learn and I can grow and I can build strength and fortitude through it all. And then I actually grow up and I start loving myself, and I don't need to rely on anything other than myself. And when we really look at step 6, and you look at tradition 6, it says less money, property, and prestige divert us from our, whatever it says at the end. Our primary purpose. So it's money, property, and prestige, which is kind of what it's saying here. That's going to divert you because you think that money, property, and prestige is more important. But it's false, man. So when you work on these things and you don't take those things to be the self-only end aim of life, and you work through them, but you don't get what you want. What don't you get? You don't get that piece of tail tonight. You don't get that woman as a girlfriend because she's hot. She has no character. You don't get that job because it's not the right thing to have. You're building character and you're doing these things, and these things are really hard to do, and you're doing what not everyone else does. Everyone's running the Fort Mac to make the 80K or the 150K. And you're working at Walmart making 25K. But what are you doing? You're building fucking character. And we play a long game of life here. Through character, you will actually get what it is that you actually are trying to get through the money and your status. The woman that comes to you is going to be like, you're a really good man. Yeah, I worked at Walmart for 5 years and I worked my way up and blah, blah, blah. And they're like, fuck, that's hard. That's quality. Like, you're a good fucking human being, right? And if you're a good human being, you'll actually attract another good human being. You go to Fort Mac and make your 150K a year and get the big truck with the big 4x4 tires and all the stuff, but you have no character. That's the kind of chick that's jumping in your truck, bro. That's why you're single again. Yeah. Because he just jumped in the truck next to you at fucking McDonald's because his truck was bigger. Or whatever, right? So, and then just finishing it off. Tradition 7, we are self-supporting through our own contributions, declining outside contributions. Through the work you do in step 6 of building character, you become self-supporting through your own resources with Creator and your pillars, and you can decline outside contributions. You don't need that to make you who you are. You're self-supporting through your own contributions of self. And then you don't need to justify or rationalize or anything your behavior because you're good with who you are. And the world really changes when you've made that step. And really all the step is, it's a change in your attitude towards God. And through the change in your attitude towards God, and life becomes your teacher. And then everything's a fucking lesson. And you're identifying self, and you'll make your amends, and you'll be identifying pride and ego and fear and these things, and then you become self-supporting. And you don't need the outside world to make you who you are. That's why step 6 is so important. That's why we're looking at the step 4, because the step 4, like Gord said, it really extrapolates and brings to the surface different behaviors. And the rest of it will too. Anyway, that's all I got.
You know what else? I just want to add one thing. We aren't abnormal. Like we're not used to this. But everybody in life, normal people all over the place are doing these things. They're relying on God. They're facing their problems. They're facing their pain. Prime example, my wife. We were married for 18 years. We have 2 children that were in their late teens. And she had to face the pain that she'd been going through with me for 2 years and finally said, you know, enough's enough, dude. You got to go. You got to go. I'm terrified. I have no material security if I kick you out. I have no emotional security, but my emotional security has been gone for a long time, let's be honest. And she was terrified, but she did it anyway because she knew that coming out the other side had to be better than what she was living. People, normal people, are doing this all the time. Well, guess what? In that moment, God stepped in. And I spent our 18th anniversary in detox. That was the last time I ever used or drank, was after she kicked me out. It was the kick I needed. It was what God went, you know what? I'm going to give this to her because I was still undecided. Normal people are doing this all the time. We just have to learn that we need it too, because we've spent our entire lives avoiding pain, changing how we feel in the moment. This is foreign to us.
I don't think that many normal people are doing it that well. I'm fucking serious. Maybe there's a lot that are.
My wife is a saint, I'm just going to say. But no, it took her a long time to get there.
Roger.
But she did. You know.
Any questions or any comments or anything anyone wants to chime in about before we go on break? Christian?
It's funny because what you guys were just saying happened to me today.
We got a mic coming your way.
Run.
So all the people on Zoom and in the pen can hear you.
Yeah, what you guys were talking about happened to me today. Usually I take piecework and do contracts, but none of it has been popping up in my life, so I went to go work hourly from the guy that gives me some contracts, and I was bumping heads with another guy, and I was telling him how things need to be done so that we can get paid early. And yeah, he just straight up told me, look, this isn't none of your business what I'm doing. And then after I took a step back, and I was like, he's right. Like, yeah. I'm just here by the hour. I don't have to trying to drive people in towards the way I think things should be done. And I've always bumped heads with this guy, so it was kind of like God's way of putting people in my life that really get under my skin, so that my humility comes down, and so I can become more of a better person, right? And create more patience in my own life, so that I can approach everybody else in that patient manner, so that I can have better relationships with everybody around us, right? And it brings a greater awareness into my life, because then if I can handle the turbulence that somebody else causes me that I don't like, then I can probably handle anything else that comes around in my life, right? And it makes life more tolerable, and it makes life easier to live through, right? Because we're not always going to run into sunshines and rainbows, right? There's always going to be rainy days. But if you can still look up and appreciate the rain, then it makes it quite a life to live.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the difference between the rain is that it's not raining on you anymore.
Well, you know what?
We used to be like, fuck, it's raining on me. And I'm like, dude, it's raining.
Yeah.
It's not raining on you. Don't be so fucking selfish and self-centered. It's just raining.
And you know what I heard about out of what you said was you recognized something. And you said it yourself. You said, I'm bumping heads, and I bump heads with these guys all the time, and I want them to do it my way. And I realized when I took a step back, I realized that I bump heads with this guy all the time. What does it say in the big book in step 4? We're to start looking at
Ourselves.
common manifestations in our lives or simple patterns. You got to witness one today. That's where the growth of character building starts to come. That type of awareness starts to God is giving you gifts. Like he's saying, hey, check this out, bro. You're doing this, and it's doing this to you in life more than this moment. And when you get to see it, you get to correct the behavior, that shit stops happening. That's really a beautiful thing, man. Yay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, G, homie G,
Gee, at the back of the room.
run, Tiff.
Can you guys on Zoom hear everything there? Yeah? Okay, cool.
So the line that this week one, failing to meet life's responsibilities with his own resources, never grows up. Disillusionment and helplessness are his lot. In times, all his protectors either flee or die, and he is once more left alone and afraid. So that line really, I'm just curious about that line because, you know, when you, from my own experience, like when I first came into the rooms, because I did go to treatment the first time, and they basically like, you don't know shit. Like, let us guide you, let us help you. And then you're in treatment or whatever for X amount of months. And then, yes, you build that sense of brotherhood or whatever, right? And then you get into the rooms, and then you encounter someone who's willing to go through the book with you, or like, you know, you have that sponsor-sponsee relationship, and then you really wonder to yourself, it's like, okay, this individual is willing to help you to go through the book, but then what if you don't have the abilities to manage your own life, right? And then you're entrusting in someone in the program to help you, guide you, and they did not instill that concept of turning it over to God like how you presented it, right? And then factoring in that, you know, you get some time and, you know, you're trying to maneuver through life, but then you're outgrowing, I wouldn't say outgrowing, but you're growing, but not wholeheartedly looking at the branches of your defects. And then you're factoring in your own instincts that it's like you never really thoroughly looked at. And then, you know, for my own experience, like I've moved to multiple different cities due to school or whatever. And, you know, I would reconnect with someone to find another sponsor. You know how they say, oh, if you move, go find another sponsor. And then what do you do when, you know, when I lived up in Edmonton, I had a sponsor who had double-digit years, and then he went back out. That definitely left a sense of, it was a teachable moment for me, because it's like, holy shit, it's like I'm not immune to this either. It doesn't matter how much time you have, but then you get to the point where, you know, you have to be able to sustain living independently on your own, but then also if you don't factor in having something greater than yourself watching over you, then you're basically disconnected, right?
Right.
But then you're in that repeated cycle.
Right. That's how we started off this whole session.
Yeah.
It's like, you're not taught right. You think this is about not drinking. You don't learn about your defective character. You don't understand self. And then the guy goes on and fucking he drinks again. So your sponsor with double-digit years drinks again. No one's teaching anybody about self. These paragraphs that we're dissecting with a fine-tooth comb, we're doing it so that doesn't happen. Because it's too common that happens. Like, that's what's more normal than what we're doing here.
Yeah.
So that's why we all, when we understand what we're doing here, we spearhead. We're the spearheads. We're the guy in the fucking room that's sharing the truth on a step 10, on a step 6, and our experience. While everyone else is looking at you going, what the fuck are you talking about? And you just show up and you do it again the next day, and the next day, and the next day, and the next day. That's why we're here.
Forget about the guy that got drunk. Focus on the guys that you can help. That's where you're going, G. And
But G, when you first met me, we had this conversation right before. Can I talk about it a little bit?
he said nervously.
He fucking didn't like me. Well, you thought I was arrogant or whatever. When you met me.
When I first met you, I went to your house and I was was with someone else in the program. I met you and I'm like, oh my God, man, this guy's just like this big AA like thumper dude, right? But then I realized, I'm like, holy shit, like this guy he's like reading right through me, and my own insecurities and my own fears were basically putting up walls because you could tell right away. It's like, okay, this guy has time, but then I realized I wasn't really helping anybody. I wasn't helping anybody. It was all everything that I've been since coming here. You basically hit it at the pinpoint that it's my ego, my self-centeredness, my fears, all these things. And that connection with something greater than myself was non-existent at that time. And you read it right through. At first, I was just, that part, I still remember when I first came here, and there was that part in the book that about how our own judgments and my own opinions about people in general was my manifestation of how I was not spiritually growing. And yeah, no, I did not like you. It was just like, who's this dude? Like, he's just like, oh. But I also remembered at that time, you were maybe like 7 or 8 years in like sobriety, and I had the exact amount of time as you, and my ego was just like, what the fuck does this guy know? But then I realized, I'm like, you were living this program where I was not. So yeah. Okay. So if you want to talk about it, then that's great. Well, you basically called me out on my shit, and I didn't want to hear it. Right. I left your house.
Right. So anyway, thanks for clearing that up. But I guess part of the point is that you've been coming here and you keep coming here, and we've had chats on the phone, and today you walk in here and it's like, hey G, how's it going? And you're like, fucking great. Yeah. Right? And like you're getting a lot of value out of this where you've been around a lot and you haven't seen this quite like this. And I don't want to say like we're the only ones doing this, but we're doing a good job at it. And that's kind of like the symptom of like it's not out there, and like you were suffering a lot for many years, and now like something's kind of clicking a bit, right? And I'm not saying that it's fully done or that I don't know. Right, it's a work in process, but something's happening. That's why we do this.
Me too.
Right? And so you get well, you live authentically, you don't fucking sell your shit out for anybody. You fucking learn your lessons on the journey to truth of yourself. You be open to understand that maybe you need to learn something still, or maybe I made a mistake, and no hard and fast lines. But then the journey of this changes, and then you take this to work, you take this to meetings, and then like that's what we're all gonna do, right? And that's kind of like why I do it, because I love hearing people go to meetings and fucking sharing the truth, and then I don't have to fucking say shit, and then they don't like them and not me. Right, Sparkles? Anyway. Just in a nutshell. Thank you, G. Appreciate you, bro.
Yeah. Me too.
And Sparkles has some fucking great growth stories in the last while, and I don't think we'll get her to share, though, because it's too fresh with other people. But amazing stuff that Sparkles is doing, and it's a lot of hard work. Like we're all doing, and a lot of you guys are doing it, and so anyway, let's take a break.
All right.
We'll get back to the podcast in a second. The opinions expressed on this podcast are solely of the guest sharing or myself. We have no affiliation with any 12-step or recovery program. And if you do like our work, please consider visiting BILLWARD.life and supporting what we do. Now back to the podcast.
Okay, let's go. We have also seen men and women who go power mad. Bottom of page 43. Who devote themselves to attempting to rule their fellows. These people often throw to the winds every chance for legitimate security and a happy family life. Whenever a human being becomes a battleground for their instincts, there can be no peace. Whenever a human being becomes a battleground for the instincts, there can be no peace. We're now talking about inside ourselves again. We are talking about relying on something greater than ourselves, but when I am relying on myself, there can be no peace. My inner self becomes a battleground. Everything I think I know wars against itself. Does that make sense? The decisions I feel like I know are probably wrong, I do anyway because I'm battling with myself. I'm confused. I don't understand right from wrong perfectly anymore because I've been living outside of it for so long. I think fundamentally, deep down within every man, woman, and child is God, which squeaks at me that tells me this is wrong, but it's very easily ignored. That battleground is full of explosions and fire and guns blazing. The instincts are ruling me, okay? But that is not all of the danger. Every time a person imposes his instincts unreasonably upon others, unhappiness follows. If the pursuit of wealth tramples upon people who happen to be in the way, then anger, jealousy, and revenge are likely to be aroused. If sex runs riot, there's a similar uproar. Demands made upon other people for too much attention, protection, and love can only invite domination or revulsion in the protectors themselves. Two emotions quite as unhealthy as the demands which evoke them. You see, that's more roots that are stemming from the original roots that Bill was talking about. When an individual's desire for prestige becomes uncontrollable, whether in the sewing circle or at the international conference table, other people suffer and often revolt. This collision of instincts can produce anything from a cold snub to a blazing revolution. What does that sound like? We've read that somewhere before, right? Anyone? The actor? Trying to control the light guys and the prop guys and all the other actors. And it goes on to talk about, and I'm nowhere near as good as Bill at quoting this stuff, but he goes on to talk about, isn't me trying to force my will on others, essentially causing them to, that's provoking them to react and hurt me in turn. And I have to realize that I'm the cause of it. How does that go? Can you say it? It's very important. You know that. You know the saying.
I wasn't listening.
Well, God is everything, so I guess it wasn't meant to be. You get the point, though, right? You remember that reading in How It Works about how we mistreated people. They reacted, which harmed us in turn, right? That's what I'm talking about right now. And that's what this is also relating. That's what we can relate to. The imposing of our own instincts, right? When my desire for prestige becomes uncontrollable, and it says whether in a sewing circle, so at whatever level. If I'm in a business meeting for a fellowship, or I'm in a boardroom for a massive corporation, whenever I'm trying to enforce my will on others, it goes wrong. This collision of instincts can produce anything from a cold snub So people just not wanting to be around us? Or a blazing revolution? Me losing my job, me losing the account, me having people quit that I need involved in my company. All sorts of stuff falls out of this. In these ways, we are set in conflict not only with ourselves, but with other people who have instincts too. So you guys, you can hear the step 3 stuff there, right? Yeah. Prime example for me, I'm going to actually stop there, and I'm going to give you guys one example before I turn it over to Bill. I worked in restoration for many years, probably over 25 years. And I became a top producing project manager at every company I worked for. And I won awards for top sales. And I really thought I was great. I really did. And I often wondered why I couldn't get along with the people inside my own office. Well, everyone else loved me. All the clients that were giving me the work loved me. And I got along great with them. And maybe they didn't love me, but I definitely bought them lots of drinks and lots of food and lots of golf and lots of weekends away, and they gave me tons of work. But what did I do for the people that helped support me inside my office? I'll tell you what I did. As a raging alcoholic, I rolled into the office somewhere around 10 and 11 o'clock in the morning, if they were lucky. I barked a bunch of orders, told people what to do, and then took off to the bar within a couple short hours of being there. That was how I treated every single person that I worked with. And it was a hard realization to understand that these people didn't like me because I treated them so poorly. You'd think it would be easy to see. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't understand why these people, I'm the top producer here. You'd think you should bend over backwards to help me. And eventually got fired from these jobs because the revenue was less important than the treatment of the majority of the staff. The people saw it. I didn't see it. It took me a long time to see it. It took me being well into recovery to see it. It took me actually working a few years, digging holes, working by the hour for the companies I subbed for when I had to offer me enough humility to recognize the common manifestations. And what a gift that is. It's hard to come by. And it takes some very humbling experiences to get there and a lot of hard work. Today, I lift people up. Today, I want you to take the credit. Today, I will apologize to a client for you because I know that A, they deserve to have someone right in front of them making that apology, not putting it on someone else. And B, you're on my team. I want you to know that you're supported. It's changed who I am as a leader. What a gift. It took a lot of work and some good, strong pillars in my life to help me get there and see it. It took a lot of those moments of self-awareness, followed by a lot of tedious work at building character, at starting to recognize by asking God for awareness, recognizing when I start acting out in those moments and stop myself. You know? And go about my own business, if you will, my brother. You know what I'm saying? These are gifts, but they take work, follow-up work. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. I'm going to touch on a few things here. Human being becomes a battleground for the instincts. There can be no peace. You know, in step 6 where it talks about peace of mind is a priceless gift. Like, I didn't really know what that meant. And, you know, in the promises, I think it says we will know peace and we will comprehend the word serenity. Like, knowing peace and comprehending serenity, that takes a lot of work. And I guess when you have comprehended serenity and you actually feel it and your brain is at peace and you know what peace is like, then you really know, right? We can all intellectualize what that is like, but the feeling of it, it's almost like I was having a talk outside with Melissa, and we were talking about letting go of the mind. It's easy to let go of things of the mind. You know that whatever it is doesn't make sense and it needs to be let go. But that is like, that's not going to really solve much when the body is still in not let go yet, right? And like when anxiety creeps in and depression creeps in or fucking fear creeps in or whatever it is, if I have a dis-ease of mind and body, I need a solution of mind and body. So it starts with the mind, but through the millimeters of the processes and doing things, you let go through the body. And then you're actually healing. That's where the healing comes from. But this is not all the danger. Every time a person imposes his instincts unreasonably upon others, unhappiness follows. And like Gord was bang on, this is like right in the step 3 reading and how it works about the actor trying to run the show. It's forever trying to arrange the lights, the ballet, the camera, and the rest of the players in their own way. If everyone would just do as we want, then everyone would be happy. The show would be great. But the thing is people don't do what we want the way that we want. So we got to find a way of like eliminating the idea that people are going to do things how we want them to be done, right? People are going to do what they're going to do. And so what's an example of unreasonably imposing your instinct on another person? How many of us have been in relationships where it's like, you don't love me, show me you love me, spend more time with me, tell me you love me, show me, and all these things, right? That is unreasonably imposing your instincts on them. And what happens? Unhappiness follows, Matt. So I'm going to skip down a few lines. Demands made upon other people for too much attention, protection, and love can only invite domination or revulsion in the protectors themselves. So that paragraph, or that part of the paragraph, ties into exactly what we read on the previous page about human being determined to depend completely upon a stronger person for guidance and protection. Like, to protect me, love me, spend your money on me so that I can be okay, and like, you buy our food and you pay our rent and you eventually their protectors flee, because what happens is it only invites domination or revulsion. So if somebody's that weak, you're either gonna like take total advantage of them or it's gonna repulse you, like, fuck off, like, Jesus, man, like, you're pathetic.
Or both.
Right? Or both. And it can flip and flop, right? And depending on how bad your codependency is, will depend on how much you flip and flop. And there's many examples of like imposing your demands on other people, right? It could be financial, material, could be instinctual, like for emotional security. That's why I always say, don't promise anything and don't draw hard and fast lines. And I'm a huge believer in, I see it all the time on Facebook and people totally don't agree with me, but I never say like we're besties. Like, we're besties. What you're doing when you're saying we're besties and we're friends forever and we're never going to fucking be apart is you're playing God. That's God. And so when it happens that you're not besties, then resentment really follows, right? And so it's just best. And then the other thing about that is relationships are always going to come and go. They come into your life and they leave your life. The problem with us as humans is there's emotional threads that lie in the dirt under the tree that are still there, that relationship gave me something, so I'm going to hang on to it at any cost, when it's really meant to go. And anything that is meant to come back, it always comes back. So learning how to like let that shit go is actually you're healing the body. But the subconscious roots that we can't see that are maybe lapped over and grown into each other, they try to hold on to those things. So when you can kind of identify, and that's why I say, over time, you will get better at seeing this stuff, because somebody brand new in recovery can't really get that part that I'm describing because they're too new. Gord talked about when he did his first step 4. It was just the beginning. It's just the beginning. The subsequent step 4s, and then he mentioned step 10, that's really where this shit happens. Step 10 is where this stuff happens, right? But most people, step 10 is like, oh, I'm just promptly admitting that I'm wrong. Oh, I got to make an amend. But you're not getting the value out of what step 10 is there. Because you think you just admit that you're wrong. But how do you know that you're wrong? Maybe you do know that you're wrong. But then no counsel is taken. You're not dissecting that with a sponsor, God-centered 12-step pillar to kind of peel back the layers of the roots and see where those roots might be overlapping. You're just taking it upon yourself to think you know what you're doing and go make an amend. Why'd you make the amend? Because you fucking want to absolve yourself of the feeling that you have, which is guilt for doing something wrong. So self. But you think you're doing the right thing. But no real tangible self aspects have been like rooted up so that you can see them. And that's what is key. That will help you heal. That's where the millimeters of healing actually come from. So we talked about whether in the desire for prestige. So that's a social instinct. So we have different social instincts. A social instinct with our peers and our friends. I want to be accepted by my peers, so I will do certain things to like make sure I'm accepted. Depending on the environment of our peer group, you know, back in the old days, it used to be like talk about other people in a negative way, and we bond in talking about somebody else in a negative way. Today, a lot of my peer group bonds through not talking about other people, but talking about our own shit. And then the moment, like we're still human, we start talking about somebody, we kind of go, we're doing it. Fuck. Okay, let's not do that. Okay, I'm going to get one more shot in there and then we'll stop. Well, I will do that because I still like that one a little bit, right? Who doesn't want to feel just a little superior to their fellows, or how about a whole lot superior, like it said in step 6 where Gord was reading. And like, that's not the man, that's the boy. I'm just, fuck, I'm just going to throw another one in there, right? But, you know, we're human. So, and then the other social instinct or emotional security might be at work, or it might be with your intimate partner. Maybe it's with your family. Like there's so many aspects of social security and emotional security that are a little bit different from each other, but I think the behaviors are similar. But it might depend on like how, when, and where the emotional deformity warped you on to what degree it fucks up your life. So I had one example like years ago. I've shared this on other podcasts that I've done, but I was about 4 years sober, and we used to go play pool at Ducky's Pub over here on 4th Street. And it was always sometimes on a Saturday, sometimes on a Sunday. But on the Saturday when we would go play pool, we'd all be sober. And there was a few of us that were super good at pool. And I was pretty good. And I would often win the table, and I wouldn't give it up for like hours and hours, and people couldn't beat me, right? And this one night I was on, and some of the boys from the meeting came with me, and we were good buddies, and we always joked and laughed. But this night the bar was super busy, so my social instinct was like ramped up, and so I was feeling really good because I kept kicking ass, and everyone, I'd be like, next, fucking rock 'em, right? Fucking just like being arrogant and ignorant, but having a good time, right? I was having a good time. People that were losing weren't.
You were.
So like the big shotism, it talks about big shotism in step 10 and the 12 and 12s. I was playing big shotism. And then a couple little hotties were around me and they wanted to talk to me and stuff. And I like that, right? So I go, one drags me into the crowd a little bit, and you know, on those busy nights when there's only one pool table, whoever's playing next, they want to get going. And all the loonies, there's like 8 loonies, they want you to play, man, because they're waiting for their game, right? And I'm like, I'm running the table and you're not taking it, so fuck, I just take my time. So anyway, I follow this little hottie over there, and we're kind of, she's showing me, introducing me to somebody, and then the guys are like, bro, it's your break. And I'm like, hold on, like, hold on. And I was like holding on for like 5 or 10 minutes, and they're just like, fuck it, we're breaking the table. And then I come back and I'm like, what the fuck? You guys broke? It's my table. And they're like, we came and got you like 10 times. And I'm like, fuck. So I get pissed off and I kind of say something. And then my buddies, they fucking threw their pool cues down and said, fuck you, play by yourself then. Then I was there by myself. And then I felt like a total idiot, loser. And then I had to make all these amends later, right? But that's the sewing circle. That was me playing the big shot and having status in like a small little thing where I got to still have humility there, man, and still work the program there, because, you know, it can cause me a lot of pain, a cold snub or a blazing revulsion. And that was a bit of a blazing revulsion.
Yeah, it was.
Where'd you stop?
Instincts 2.
Okay, I'm good. Okay, I'll read. Alcoholics especially should be able to see that instinct run wild in themselves is the underlying cause of the destructive drinking. That's why we drink, is ultimately the instincts, okay? But in the step 4 later on, it talks about character defects representing instincts gone astray has been the primary cause of our drinking and failure at life. So it's saying that our defects that we see, that actually is the main reason, but it's the instinct that these defects represent. That's why we actually drink. So then here it is, it's saying it again, is the underlying cause of their destructive drinking. We have drunk to drown feelings of fear, frustration, and depression. We have drunk to escape the guilt of passions. And then we have drunk again to make more passions possible. We have drunk for vain glory, that we might enjoy foolish dreams of pomp and power. This perverse soul sickness is not pleasant to look upon. Instincts on rampage balk at investigation. So again, the perverse soul sickness that we have, our spiritual dis-ease, is not easy to look at squarely, looking at the unhappiness that this has caused others and ourselves. So in my instance with the pool table, I had to look squarely at what I did. And my pride was really not liking that. But like Christian described and Gord described, the humility in those things is what teaches, and it's often painful. Mm-hmm. So there's levels of humility again, right? Humiliation, which I went through, you went through, and you went through in these examples. And then the change of the humbling through the pain. But really what pulls us through is this desire to seek and do God's will, this desire to actually want to change. And sometimes it doesn't make sense to not react or do whatever, but the payoff comes later down the road, but you don't see it right away. The minute we make a serious attempt to probe them, we are liable to suffer severe reactions. So it's saying the minute you make a serious attempt to probe some of these issues that you have, you're going to suffer severe reactions. And that might be, it could be a number of different things, but it's going to be painful regardless. And sometimes as you do the dark night of the soul work, which is what this is, it's soul work. And it's different than doing trauma work, because trauma work, they go right in and they just start stirring shit up. Mm-hmm. The thing about 12-step recovery programs is it's like a earth scraper. You know, when you look at a new development, you see those big buggies going around and they run back and forth. They're actually stripping the ground one little bucket at a time. There's a blade on the bottom of their bucket, and they're scraping up the topsoil, and then they go make a big, huge pile of topsoil, and then they level the ground. That's what the program does. It starts scraping things off layer by layer, and it doesn't just dig this big hole, stir it all up for 4 weeks, and say, okay, you're good, you're on your own, you did your trauma program, you graduated. And then you're left going, holy fuck, I feel really messed up. And then what do you do with that, right? They often don't teach you to go to Creator, so then you're kind of left stuck with this stuff that's all stirred up that you have no no course of action to really deal with it. And your ego was told that, oh, this program's going to heal you. So you're like, oh, I'm healed, but you're not healed, because it doesn't work like that, because the branches all connect and they interweave with each other, and healing doesn't work like that in 4 weeks or whatever, however many weeks. So this program like strips things, and when it's ready to be revealed, it gets revealed, and then you can deal with the shit. The thing is, if you don't scrape it and you just leave it and you just fucking run on self, the shit's coming up. You don't know how to deal with it because you haven't learned enough about self or going to creator, working with pillars, that now the shit deals with you and it really messes you up. If temperamentally we're on the depressive side, we're apt to be swamped with guilt and self-loathing. We wallow in this messy bog, often getting a mishap and a painful pleasure out of it. Maybe you're the depressive and you've never really seen it written like this, where you get a mishap and a painful pleasure out of it. Who gets pleasure out of like the mishap and of guilt and shame and all this stuff? Well, there's a certain comfortability in some of our old familiar feelings and grounds where we kind of, my logic says I wouldn't like that, but my subconscious knows it, so it actually enjoys it, and it is kind of pleasurable. A lot of people will sit in self-pity and fucking they wallow in it, and they actually do like it. But if you ask them, they're like, why would I like that? That's not the point. The point is that they actually like it and they wallow in it.
Well, that, and sometimes I think when you look at yourself and some of the behavioral issues we've had, we're so skewed and we're so distorted on how we view things that there's a little bit of egotistical pleasure in seeing some of that behavior. Like, I beat the shit out of that guy and blah, blah, blah. You know, I get that from it as well. You know, I did a step 5 with a guy years ago out in a little church out in Millerville. And he talked to me for 6 hours, and half of it was about all the murders he'd committed. It was crazy, man. I never saw the guy again, by the way, after that. So, but
Lucky for you.
it was crazy. He was, yeah, right. But you could tell he thought he was something, and that's something we have to be really careful with. Like, this is a job that's hard. This is a hard job, and we have to hit it head on, and we have to recognize. I had to recognize that change was critical. I had to change, and I could take no egotistical joy out of anything I had done in the past, even though I did. I'd be a liar to tell you that I didn't. Some of the things I did, I thought were pretty cool at the time. I look back on them now and I think how disgusting that was. But we can get caught up in that. Sorry, I didn't mean to.
No, that's okay, bro. As we morbidly pursue this melancholy activity, we sink to such a point of despair that nothing but oblivion looks possible as a solution. Here, of course, we have lost all perspective and therefore all genuine humility, for this is pride in reverse. So for the depressive or for the over-eccentric ego alcoholic, like, that's why it's so important to, like, any person capable of enough willingness and honesty try repeatedly step 6 on all these faults without reservation. Like, you know, in the step 1 where it talks about the guy goes to the bar and he's just going to be like, oh, I'm just going to have one. There's a solution. Oh, I'm just going to have one. And he's like, what the hell? I'll stop with the 6th. And then he's like, what the hell? What's the use anyway? And he drinks for oblivion. That's what we do with the defective character. I might be like, I'm just going to wallow in a little self-pity today. And then, you know what? I'm gonna really wallow in it. I'm going to throw on those movies and those songs that really get me down. And then, you know, I'm fucking now, you don't really have a choice. Now you're super depressed, right? And like, that's how defects work. And we got to like stop them before the first drink. Like the alcoholic has no effective mental defense against the first drink. We all know that. And you've heard me say it before. We have no effective mental defense against the first think. So as we may have that first think, before it turns into a drink, we got to stop it. And then we have processes and we have pillars and we have to find out self and do certain things. So we stop going down the rabbit hole. Once you go down the rabbit hole, like with self-pity and victim, like it's really, really hard to come back out of that, man. Like super hard.
Morbid reflection.
Roger. For this is pride in reverse. We think of pride as like being over egocentric. This is exact opposite. It's just pride in reverse. So it's the exact same thing. One just is this way and one is the other way. This is not a moral inventory at all. It's the very process by which the depressive has so often been led to the bottle and to extinction. And like, yeah, I don't know. If, however, our natural disposition is inclined to self-righteousness or grandiosity, our reaction will be just the opposite. We will be offended at AA's suggested inventory. No doubt we shall point with pride to the good lives we thought we led before the bottle cut us down. We shall claim that our serious character defects, if we think we have any at all, have been caused chiefly by excessive drinking. This being so, we think it logically follows that sobriety first and last and all the time is the only thing we need to work for. And a lot of people in the programs think that that's the case. And if you read this literature, it says that's the barest beginning. That's just the barest beginning is removing substance. What we're really talking about is what we're talking about today. We believe that our one-time good characters will be revived the moment we quit alcohol. If we were pretty nice people all along, except for our drinking, what need is there for a moral inventory now that we are sober? And that is something that's big also.
Avoidance.
And, you know, but a lot of these people that just stay sober, they suffer the pangs of like anxiousness and depression and anger and all the things that like make our lives worse. They suffer from that. Or if maybe they're not suffering at those rock bottom levels of those things, life's very gray, and then they're stuck. Like so many people, and I actually saw a couple posts recently of guys I know that haven't worked the steps and they're 2 or 3 years sober, and one of them said, I'm stuck. That was a perfect example from the one gentleman that I saw in his post. He's stuck. When you're working a good program, you typically won't get stuck for too long, because you're always moving and trying something. And if you're stuck, there's a good reason, and you'll find out the reason because something will be revealed. But you don't really get stuck for too long. Have you gotten stuck?
Briefly, yeah.
Yeah. And I got stuck at year 6. And it was fucking painful. But I kept doing the things. But after it was revealed, it was Creator brought up a whole bunch of stuff like in year 6, guilt and shame. A lot of my guilt and shame that I didn't know was coming up because I thought I had actually dealt with a lot of that. I didn't deal with it. And it came up in year 6 and it kicked my ass from like January to about June. But at least I knew that I was in it because of the program. But if I hadn't been working a program, like there's one of the first times in my recovery that I thought like suicide sounded like a good idea. But I knew that was just like a self-delusion thing. But if I didn't know better, fuck, who knows, right?
I got stuck this year in year 9. And it was with anger. You too, eh? Bill talked about that earlier, that anger is a symptom of sadness from somewhere, right? And it took some work. I was in it for a couple months, and I even talked about it at the beginning of this study a couple times. Remember about getting angry with that guy that I have to work with, and how it's caused me emotional hangover and all sorts of stuff. And that was going on and on, and I'm through it now, and I understand that was a fear of losing what I worked so hard to gain. And what is that? That is a fear that God doesn't know what's right for me, right? And if I believe that God has got me and God is everything, then that doesn't even come into play. And I can deal with those types of guys the way I do normally. And I was able to get back to my behavior, the back to the stuff that I've practiced for years and years now. And it was painful. Nothing, I tell you, man, every lesson I've ever learned has been painful. It's just how long am I going to stay in the pain is the difference. This one was a long one. It was a couple months. I've spent years in pain. So I call that good progress, you know.
Okay, well, I didn't realize what time it was. So anyway, we'll just keep you posted. We're going to try to finish this off next week. Hopefully. And yeah, that's it.